The penthouse smelled like new money and old lies. Evangeline Thorne stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master bedroom, her fingers trembling as she fastened the clasp of the diamond necklace. $200,000 worth of Harry Winston sat against her collarbone like a shackle made of light. The red Valentino gown clung to her body in ways that made her feel both powerful and exposed, the fabric whispering against her skin with every breath. Behind her, the Manhattan skyline glittered through the windows like a constellation of broken promises. 57 floors below the city moved in its relentless rhythm, oblivious to the war being waged in gilded cages high above the streets. She thought about ballet, the way your body learned to lie before your mind caught up, how you could smile while your feet bled inside your point shoes, how you could make suffering look like grace. Tonight would require every lesson those years had taught her. The memory hit her without warning. 3 seconds that changed everything. A sleek office on the 40th floor of the Chrysler Building. Vivian Ashford's manicured hand sliding a contract across black walnut. The scratch of pen on paper. Her own signature shaky but determined, binding her to a devil's bargain she'd convinced herself was survival. $5 million to destroy a man from the inside out. Eva closed her eyes, and the present rushed back. Tonight was the Manhattan Elite Charity Gala at the Metropolitan Club. Tonight, Dominic Ashford would introduce her to 500 of the city's most powerful people as his future. Tonight she would stand beside a man who believed she loved him, knowing that love had become the most dangerous truth she'd ever told. Her phone buzzed against the marble vanity. No caller ID. She knew who it was. The voice on the other end was silk over steel. "You look beautiful, Ms. Thorne. The red was an excellent choice." Eva's blood turned to ice water. She spun toward the window, searching the buildings across the street, but saw only her own reflection staring back, pale and terrified. "Don't bother looking. I'm not watching you directly. I have people for that." Vivian Ashford's laugh was soft, almost maternal. It made Eva's skin crawl. "Tonight is very important, Evangeline. The photographs will be everywhere by morning. Social media gossip columns, business pages, my ex-husband parading his new trophy. It needs to be perfect." Eva found her voice, though it came out smaller than she wanted. "I know what I'm supposed to do." "Do you?" "Because our last conversation suggested otherwise. You seem to be developing feelings. That wasn't part of our arrangement." The line went dead before Eva could respond. She stared at the phone, her pulse hammering in her ears. Somewhere in this city, Vivian was watching, waiting, playing a game with rules Eva was only beginning to understand. She set the phone down carefully as if it might explode. In the mirror, a stranger stared back. Hair swept into an elegant chignon. Makeup applied by a professional who'd arrived at 4 that afternoon. Lips painted the color of blood. She looked like she belonged in Dominic's world. The bedroom door opened. Eva's heart lurched, but it was only Claire, the penthouse housekeeper, carrying a crystal vase filled with white roses. "Mr. Ashford asked me to bring these up. He said white was your favorite." It wasn't. Eva had mentioned once casually that she preferred wildflowers. But Dominic had a habit of hearing what he wanted to hear, of creating a version of her that fit more neatly into his life. She'd learned not to correct him. Men like Dominic Ashford didn't appreciate being wrong. "They're beautiful. Thank you, Claire." The older woman lingered in the doorway, her expression troubled. "Miss Thorne, if you don't mind me saying, be careful tonight. Mrs. Ashford, the first one, she'll be there. I worked for them both for 10 years before the divorce. She's not someone who forgives easily." Eva's throat tightened. "I appreciate the warning." After Claire left, Eva stood alone with the roses and her reflection. 8 months ago, she'd been teaching beginner ballet to 6-year-olds in a studio in Brooklyn that smelled like sweat and rosin. She'd been going to her mother's hospital room every night after class, watching cancer eat away at the only person who'd ever really loved her. She'd been drowning in medical bills and desperation, watching her savings evaporate like water in the desert. Then came the benefit performance at Lincoln Center, American Ballet Theater's annual gala for pediatric cancer research. Eva hadn't danced in years, not since the injury that ended her professional career at 23, but they needed volunteers for the Corps. She'd said yes because it was for children like her students, for mothers like hers. Dominic had been in the front row. Later, she'd learned he'd donated $500,000 that night. At the time, she'd only known that his eyes had followed her across the stage, that when the performance ended, he'd been waiting backstage with a check made out to her mother's hospital for $50,000. "I believe in supporting the arts," he'd said, pressing the check into her shaking hands, "and supporting beautiful women who remind me why I worked so hard to build my empire." She should have known then. Should have seen the transaction buried in the generosity, the unspoken price tag attached to his kindness. But she'd been so tired, so scared, so desperate for someone to throw her a rope that she'd grabbed it without checking if it was attached to an anchor. The affair had started slowly. Dinners at restaurants where the wine cost more than her monthly rent. Gifts that appeared at her studio wrapped in designer packaging. His driver picking her up after class, taking her to the penthouse where Dominic would be waiting with champagne and conversation that made her feel intelligent, desired, seen. He'd told her about his marriage. 15 years of slow-growing ice between him and Vivian. No children, no passion, just two people who'd built an empire together and forgotten why they'd wanted one in the first place. He made it sound sad and inevitable, this dissolution of vows. He made Eva feel like salvation rather than sin. For 6 weeks, she'd believed the fairy tale. Then Vivian had called. The meeting had been in a lawyer's office, all leather chairs and mahogany panels and windows that looked out over Central Park. Vivian had been wearing Chanel and diamonds, her blonde hair swept back from a face that cosmetic surgery had kept frozen somewhere between 40 and eternal. She'd looked at Eva the way you might examine a particularly interesting insect. "Ms. Thorne, thank you for coming. I'm sure this is uncomfortable for you." Eva had perched on the edge of her chair, every muscle coiled for flight. "Mrs. Ashford, I didn't know he was married when we—" "Please, I didn't ask you here for an apology." Vivian had crossed her legs, smooth as a blade sliding from its sheath. "I asked you here because I have a proposition. One that could solve both our problems very elegantly." She'd slid the contract across the desk. 5 pages of legalese that boiled down to something very simple. Destroy Dominic Ashford. Get paid $5 million. "You see, my husband thinks he's very clever. He thinks I don't know about his little hobbies, his need for younger, more pliable women to stroke his ego along with other things. But I know everything, Ms. Thorne. I always have. The difference is this time I'm going to use it." Eva had stared at the contract, her mind racing. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "Exactly what you're already doing. Be his mistress. Make him fall in love with you. Convince him to divorce me and marry you instead." Vivian had smiled, and it was the coldest thing Eva had ever seen. "Then at a very public moment you're going to destroy him, humiliate him in front of everyone he's ever tried to impress, and I will make sure you're compensated generously for your trouble." Why would you want this?" Vivian's smile had vanished. For just a moment something raw and wounded had flashed across her perfect features. "Because 15 years ago my father killed himself after Dominic destroyed his business. My father built the Whitmore Hotel empire over 40 years. Dominic dismantled it in 6 months to make room for one of his towers. My father lost everything: his company, his reputation, his will to live. I married Dominic to get close to him, to wait for the perfect moment. That moment is now." Eva had felt sick. "I can't. I'm not that person." "Then your mother will die." Vivian had said it without inflection, stating a fact. "I've looked into your financial situation. You have maybe 2 months before the hospital stops treatment. Maybe less. This money could save her life. All you have to do is what you've already been doing, except this time you do it with purpose." The contract had felt like a living thing in Eva's hands, pulsing with dark possibility. She'd thought about her mother's latest scans, the way the oncologist's face had tightened when he explained the treatment options that insurance wouldn't cover. She'd thought about ballet and all the times she'd danced through pain, convincing herself that suffering was just another form of strength. She'd signed. Vivian had smiled and slid her a check for $100,000. "Consider this a down payment for your mother's next round of treatment. The rest comes when the job is finished." That had been 6 months ago. Since then, Eva had played her part perfectly. She'd moved into the penthouse after Dominic's divorce was finalized. She'd learned to navigate his world of charity galas and business dinners, learning the names of artists and wines and all the tiny shibboleths that separated the wealthy from everyone else. She'd let him dress her, display her, possess her. And somewhere along the way, the unthinkable had happened. She'd started to see him. Not the caricature Vivian had painted, not the ruthless developer who'd destroyed Harrison Whitmore, but the man who woke up at 3 in the morning, sometimes standing at the window with shadows under his eyes, haunted by ghosts he never named. The man who'd built his empire from nothing, who'd grown up poor in Hell's Kitchen and clawed his way to penthouses through sheer force of will. The man who looked at her sometimes like she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. Eva turned away from the mirror, unable to face her own eyes. Love hadn't been part of the plan. Love was a complication that could get them both killed. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a number she didn't recognize, but she knew who it was. Vivian had multiple phones, multiple numbers, always staying one step ahead of anyone trying to trace her. Tonight, he'll propose. You'll say no. You'll tell him you can't marry a man who abandoned his wife. You'll break his heart in front of everyone. Stick to the plan, Ms. Thorne. Your mother's next treatment is scheduled for Monday. It would be terrible if funding suddenly became unavailable. Eva's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. The plan had always been clear. Get Dominic to propose publicly. Reject him publicly. Destroy his reputation in front of the people whose opinions he valued most. Vivian would handle the rest, would use the scandal to destroy his business relationships, to dismantle everything he'd built the way he'd dismantled her father's legacy. But that was before Eva had started keeping a toothbrush at the penthouse. Before she'd learned that Dominic liked his coffee black and his eggs over easy, that he was dyslexic, and had taught himself to read by staying up late with a dictionary and stubborn pride. Before he'd told her about his father walking out when he was 12, about watching his mother work 3 jobs to keep them fed, about swearing he'd never be that powerless again. Before she'd realized that Vivian's victim was just another broken person trying to outrun his past. The bedroom door opened again. This time it was Dominic. He stopped in the doorway, and for a moment neither of them spoke. He was wearing Tom Ford, dark and impeccable, his salt and pepper hair swept back from a face that magazines called distinguished. At 45 he looked like money personified, but Eva could see the tells now. The slight uncertainty in his eyes when he looked at her, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. The way his shoulders relaxed when she smiled at him like he'd been holding his breath. "You're stunning." The words came out rougher than he probably intended. Eva felt something crack inside her chest. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He crossed the room, stopping just close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive, subtle, understated. Everything about Dominic whispered wealth rather than shouting it. Old money manners wrapped around new money ambition. "I got you something. For tonight." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Eva's heart stopped. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. The proposal was supposed to come at the gala in front of everyone. This was wrong. This was off script. Dominic opened the box. Inside was a bracelet, platinum and diamonds, delicate as spider silk, and probably worth more than the studio where Eva used to teach. "It was my mother's, the only thing she kept from before my father left. She gave it to me before she died and told me to give it to someone who mattered." His hands were shaking as he fastened it around her wrist. Eva couldn't breathe. This wasn't the calculated seduction of a rich man buying a pretty toy. This was real. This was Dominic offering her the only thing he had that wasn't built on conquest and commerce. "Dominic the First. I know we haven't known each other long. I know this world probably seems crazy to you sometimes, but you make me feel like I'm more than just my net worth, Eva. You make me feel like the man I wanted to be before I became the man I had to be." He cupped her face in his hands, and his eyes were so sincere it hurt to look at them. "Tonight is going to be big. I'm introducing you to everyone who matters. I'm telling the world that you're mine and I'm yours. I need you to know that I'm serious about this. About us." Eva's throat closed. She thought about Vivian's text. About the proposal that was supposed to come in front of 500 witnesses, about the rejection she was supposed to deliver, about the mother dying in a hospital bed waiting for money that would only come if Eva went through with Vivian's plan. She kissed him. It was the only answer she could give. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and for a moment she let herself pretend this was simple, that she was just a woman wearing her fiancé's mother's bracelet, getting ready for a party where everyone would celebrate their happiness. Then Dominic's phone buzzed. He pulled back, frowning at the screen. "The car's here. We should go." Eva nodded, not trusting her voice. She picked up her clutch, checking her lipstick one last time in the mirror. The woman staring back looked like she belonged in this world of silk and diamonds. Only Eva could see the girl from Brooklyn underneath the one who'd sold her soul to save her mother and found herself choking on the price. The elevator ride down was silent. Dominic's hand rested on the small of her back, warm and possessive. Eva counted the floors. 57, 56, 55. Each number a heartbeat closer to the moment everything would either fall apart or fall into place. The lobby was all marble and gold, the doorman tipping his hat as they passed. Outside, a black Mercedes waited James at the wheel. He'd been driving Dominic for 12 years, had driven him and Vivian to their wedding, had probably driven Dominic to meet all his previous mistresses. His eyes met Eva's in the rearview mirror, and she saw something there. Pity, maybe. Or warning. The drive to the Metropolitan Club took 20 minutes through Manhattan traffic. Eva watched the city slide past all the people living their ordinary lives in the shadow of buildings owned by men like Dominic. She wondered how many of them knew what it cost to live this high above the ground, how many understood that penthouses were just prettier prisons. Dominic was on his phone handling some crisis with a property deal in Queens. Eva listened to him negotiate, watched him operate. This was the man Vivian wanted destroyed. The man who'd crushed her father's business to make room for another tower. Eva tried to reconcile that with the man who'd given her his mother's bracelet, who woke up with nightmares he never explained. Maybe both were true. Maybe people were just collections of contradictions held together by desire and fear. The Metropolitan Club rose before them, all neoclassical columns and old New York grandeur. Photographers lined the red carpet, flashbulbs already popping for the early arrivals. Eva's stomach twisted. Dominic ended his call and turned to her, his expression softening. "Ready?" No, she wasn't ready. She'd never be ready. But she nodded anyway, letting him help her from the car. The cameras exploded. Dominic's hand tightened on hers as they started up the red carpet. Eva smiled, trying to channel every acting lesson she'd absorbed during her years as a dancer. Smile like you mean it. Move like you're weightless. Make suffering look like grace. "Mr. Ashford, Mr. Ashford, who's your date?" Dominic's smile was pure confidence. "This is Evangeline Thorne. She's a very special woman." More questions, more flashes. Eva's vision went white with light. Beside her, Dominic was in his element, giving sound bites about the charity, about the importance of giving back. He was good at this. You didn't build an empire without knowing how to work a room, how to make people believe whatever story you were selling. They made it through the gauntlet and into the club's marble foyer. Crystal chandeliers hung from gilded ceilings. Women in couture air-kissed each other, while men in bespoke suits discussed deals over champagne. This was where the real power in New York gathered, away from cameras and common people. Eva had been to events like this before with Dominic, but tonight felt different, heavier, like the air was charged with electricity before a storm. "Dominic, good to see you." A silver-haired man approached, hand extended. Eva recognized him from photos. Harrison Whitmore's business partner, Gerald Thorne. No relation to her despite the shared name. He'd survived the Whitmore collapse by selling out early, leaving Harrison to burn alone. The men shook hands, exchanged pleasantries about the market and the mayor and all the small talk that greased the wheels of their world. Eva smiled politely, playing her part. Then she saw Vivian. She stood across the room in Chanel armor, blonde and perfect and utterly composed. Their eyes met. Vivian raised her champagne glass in a small, mocking salute. Eva's blood turned cold. This wasn't supposed to happen. Vivian wasn't supposed to be here. The divorce agreement had included a clause about public appearances, about maintaining distance to avoid awkwardness. But here she was, a ghost, haunting her own life. Dominic followed Eva's gaze and went rigid. "What is she doing here?" Gerald Thorne cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Vivian's on the charity board. Has been for years. I suppose she has every right to attend." Dominic's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. What could he say? They were divorced. She had every right to be anywhere she wanted. But Eva could feel the tension radiating off him, could see his carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. Vivian began walking toward them. The crowd seemed to part for her, or maybe Eva was imagining it. Maybe power always made its own space in a room. "Dominic, how lovely to see you." Her voice was honey and arsenic. Up close, Eva could see that Vivian had aged beautifully, the kind of aging that required dermatologists and personal trainers and the best surgeons money could buy. She looked at Eva the way you might look at a stain on expensive upholstery. "Miss Thorne, what an interesting dress." "Valentino, isn't it? I had one very similar. About 5 years ago." The insult was so subtle that most people would miss it. But Eva heard it. Yesterday's fashion for yesterday's woman. Dominic's hand tightened on Eva's waist. "Vivian, we were just heading in. If you'll excuse us." "Of course. Enjoy your evening. Both of you." Vivian smiled, and Eva saw the threat hidden in those perfect teeth. This was a warning, a reminder. Vivian controlled the board, controlled the evening, controlled Eva's fate and her mother's life. Stick to the plan or face the consequences. They moved into the main ballroom. Tables draped in white silk surrounded a dance floor that gleamed like ice. The ceiling was painted with cherubs and clouds, some Gilded Age fantasy of heaven. 500 people who ran the world gathered to congratulate themselves on their charity while avoiding taxes and stepping on anyone who couldn't afford a ticket. Eva hated them, hated herself for being here, for wearing their diamonds and eating their food and pretending she belonged. Their table was near the front. Place cards in calligraphy marked seats for Dominic and Eva, along with several board members and their spouses. Everyone stood as they approached, greetings and handshakes and air kisses that meant nothing. Eva sat down and immediately reached for champagne. The crystal felt fragile in her hand, like it might shatter if she held it too tight. Like she might shatter. Dinner was 7 courses of food that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Eva pushed foie gras around her plate while conversations swirled around her. The men discussed real estate and the stock market. The women discussed their children's private schools and upcoming trips to the Hamptons. No one asked Eva anything substantive. She was decoration, not participant. Halfway through the main course, Dominic stood. The table fell silent. Around the room, other conversations began to quiet as people noticed. Eva's heart stopped. This was it. The proposal. Right on schedule, exactly as Vivian had predicted. Dominic cleared his throat. His hand was shaking slightly as he reached into his pocket. "I apologize for interrupting dinner, but I have something important to say." The entire ballroom was watching now. Eva could feel 500 pairs of eyes, could see camera phones appearing. This would be on social media within minutes. Vivian had planned it perfectly. 8 months ago, I met someone who changed my life. Evangeline Thorne reminded me that there's more to life than boardrooms and balance sheets. She reminded me what it feels like to be human. He pulled out a ring box, Tiffany blue, unmistakable. Eva's vision tunneled. "Eva, I know this is fast. I know we come from different worlds. But you make me want to be a better man than I've been. You make me believe in second chances." He knelt. The crowd gasped. Somewhere someone started filming. "Will you marry me?" The ring caught the chandelier light, throwing rainbows across the white tablecloth. It was massive, obscene, a diamond the size of a cherry surrounded by smaller stones. The kind of ring that announced ownership as much as love. Eva's mouth went dry. In her clutch, her phone buzzed. She didn't need to check it to know what Vivian's message would say. Say no. Destroy him. Save your mother. She looked at Dominic's face, saw hope and vulnerability and genuine emotion. This man who'd built an empire through ruthlessness, who'd destroyed companies and crushed competitors, was kneeling before her in front of everyone he'd ever tried to impress. The bracelet on her wrist felt heavy. His mother's bracelet, the only thing he had that wasn't built on conquest. Eva heard herself speak. The words came from somewhere deep and true, from the part of her that still believed in ballet and beauty and things that mattered more than money. Yes. The crowd erupted. Applause and cheers and champagne glasses raised in celebration. Dominic stood sliding the ring onto her finger, kissing her while flash bulbs exploded, and 500 people witnessed what they thought was a fairy tale. Eva kissed him back, her heart hammering. Across the room she saw Vivian. The woman's face had gone white, then red, then carefully blank. The plan was ruined. Eva had just committed the ultimate betrayal. And somewhere in New York her mother was dying, waiting for money that would never come. The penthouse felt different when they returned, colder despite the heat pumping through the vents. Eva stood in the living room while Dominic poured scotch at the bar, her engagement ring catching the light from the city below. 3 carats of perfectly cut deception sat on her finger, heavy as a murder weapon. Her phone had been vibrating non-stop since they'd left the gala. She hadn't looked at it. Didn't need to. Vivian's fury would be waiting in those messages, each one a countdown to consequences Eva couldn't afford to face. Dominic handed her a glass. His smile was pure joy, unguarded in a way she'd never seen. It made her want to scream. "I can't believe you said yes. I was terrified you'd say no." Eva forced herself to meet his eyes. "Why would I say no? Because you're 28 and brilliant and you could have anyone. And I'm a 45-year-old workaholic with more baggage than JFK Airport." He laughed, but there was real insecurity underneath. Eva saw it now, the cracks in his armor. Dominic Ashford, master of the universe, was just another broken man desperate to believe someone could love him. She kissed him before the guilt could choke her. His arms came around her waist, pulling her close. The scotch sloshed dangerously in her glass. "I need to call my mother. Tell her the news." Dominic's face lit up. "Of course. God, I should have asked you to call her from the gala. I wasn't thinking." He wasn't thinking because he didn't know Eva's mother was sedated in Mount Sinai's oncology wing tubes, running into her arms fighting a war her daughter had just lost for her. The treatment scheduled for Monday would be canceled now. Vivian would make sure of it. Eva excused herself to the bedroom, closing the door with shaking hands. Her phone screen showed 37 missed calls, 15 voicemails, 63 texts, all from unknown numbers that Eva knew were Vivian's rotating arsenal of burner phones. She opened the most recent message. "You just signed your mother's death warrant. I hope he was worth it." Eva's knees gave out. She slid down the door, the Valentino pooling around her like blood. Her mother had 3 months, maybe 4 if they started aggressive treatment immediately. Without Vivian's money, without the experimental therapy that insurance wouldn't cover, she had weeks. The phone rang. Eva stared at it, watching the unknown number flash. On the 7th ring, she answered. Vivian's voice was ice wrapped in silk. "I underestimated you, Ms. Thorne. I thought you were just another desperate girl willing to do anything for money. I didn't realize you were stupid enough to develop actual feelings." Eva's throat was too tight to speak. "Let me be very clear about what happens now. The $100,000 I gave you, that was a loan. I'll be expecting repayment by the end of the month with interest. Your mother's next treatment canceled. The experimental trial she was approved for, I sit on the hospital's board of directors. One word from me, and she's removed from the program." The words hit like bullets. Eva pressed her hand to her mouth, trying not to make a sound. "You had one job, destroy him publicly, make him a laughingstock. Instead, you gave him the happiest moment of his pathetic life in front of everyone who matters. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Eva found her voice. It came out raw, broken. I couldn't do it to him." "How touching. Your conscience just killed your mother." The line went dead. Eva sat there on the bedroom floor in her expensive dress and her dead woman's bracelet, the engagement ring on her finger feeling like a noose tightening. She'd spent 6 months planning to betray a man, and in the end, she'd betrayed everyone. Dominic didn't know he'd proposed to a spy. Her mother didn't know her daughter had chosen love over her life. Vivian didn't know that Eva had stopped playing her game, or maybe Vivian knew everything. Maybe that was the point. Eva pulled herself up and walked to the ensuite bathroom. She ran cold water splashing her face, watching mascara run down her cheeks in black rivers. The woman in the mirror looked like a ghost, haunted by choices that had no right answers, only different flavors of wrong. A knock on the bedroom door made her jump. "Eva, you okay in there?" Dominic's voice was concerned, caring. Eva wanted to scream at him, wanted to tell him everything to unload the poison she'd been carrying. But confessing wouldn't save her mother. It would only destroy them both. She wiped her face and opened the door. Dominic stood there in shirt sleeves, his tie undone. He looked younger, like this, less polished, more human. "Hey, I was getting worried." Eva manufactured a smile. "Sorry, just emotional. Big night." He pulled her into his arms, and she let him hold her because it might be the last time. When he learned the truth, and he would learn it, eventually truth had a way of surfacing like corpses in water. He would never touch her again. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll start planning. Figure out when you want the wedding wear. Whatever you want, it's yours." Eva nodded against his chest, breathing in his cologne, memorizing this moment before everything turned to ash. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. She lay in bed listening to Dominic's breathing, watching the city lights paint shadows across the ceiling. At 4 a.m, she gave up and went to the kitchen making coffee in the dark. Her phone sat on the marble counter like a bomb. Eva picked it up, scrolling through Vivian's messages. Most were variations on the same threat. Pay back the money. Watch your mother die. Suffer. But one message was different. Sent at 2:30 in the morning. "There's still a way to fix this. Call me." Eva stared at the screen. Every instinct screamed to delete it, to block the number, to run. But her mother's face floated before her eyes, pale and thin, the way she'd looked last week when Eva had visited. She'd been sleeping, her breathing shallow machines beeping a rhythm that sounded like borrowed time. Eva called. Vivian answered on the first ring, her voice sharp and alert despite the hour. "I was wondering if you'd be smart enough to phone." "What do you want?" "The same thing I've always wanted. Dominic destroyed. You just need to be more creative about it." Eva's hand tightened on the phone. "I can't. I won't." "Then your mother dies. It's very simple math, Ms. Thorne." The kitchen felt too small, the walls closing in. Eva walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the glass. 57 floors below the city was waking up. Delivery trucks and early commuters, people living normal lives with normal problems. "There has to be another way. Let me pay you back. I'll get a loan, sell everything I have." Vivian's laugh was sharp. "You have nothing. You're a ballet teacher who lives in a studio apartment in Brooklyn that smells like mildew and broken dreams. The only thing of value you possess is your access to Dominic Ashford." Eva closed her eyes. The glass was cold against her skin. "I'll give you one more chance. One. But this time the stakes are higher. You don't just humiliate him. You destroy everything. His business, his reputation, his ability to ever show his face in this city again." "How?" Vivian's voice took on a quality Eva had never heard before, hunger dark and deep. "You're going to become his wife. You're going to marry him, gain his complete trust, learn every dirty secret he's ever buried, and then at the moment when he's most vulnerable, most certain of your love, you're going to expose it all. Every illegal deal, every bribed inspector, every corner he's cut building his empire. You're going to burn him to the ground." Eva's stomach turned. "That could take years." "Then you'd better hope your mother lasts that long. But to help things along, I'll make you a deal. Bring me something useful within 3 months, real evidence of criminal activity, and I'll fund her treatment. Keep bringing me evidence, keep your mother alive. The day Dominic goes down, you get your $5 million and your freedom." The proposal hung in the air like smoke. Eva thought about her mother's oncologist explaining that without treatment the cancer would spread to her bones, her brain. She thought about her mother dying alone while Eva played house with a billionaire. Why do you hate him this much?" For a long moment Vivian was silent. When she spoke again, her voice was different, quieter, more human. My father didn't just lose his business when Dominic destroyed Whitmore Hotels. He lost his mind. I found him in his study the night before he died. He had a gun in his hand and tears on his face, and he looked at me like I was a stranger, like he couldn't remember why he'd fought so hard to build something to leave a legacy to matter. Vivian's breathing was uneven. He shot himself the next morning. I was the one who found him. I was 27 years old, and I found my father's body in the same study where he'd taught me to read. There was blood on the books on the Persian rug my grandmother had brought from Iran, on the photograph of our family that he kept on his desk. Ava felt something crack in her chest. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. Two women both trying to save their fathers in different ways, both failing. I spent 15 years married to the man who killed him. 15 years smiling and hosting dinners and pretending to love someone I was planning to destroy. Do you know what that does to you? What it costs to hate someone every day and hide it behind kisses? Vivian's voice hardened again. So, yes, Ms. Thorne, I hate him this much, and you're going to help me finish what I started, or your mother joins my father in the ground. The line went dead. Eva stood at the window watching the sun start to rise over the East River. She thought about ballet, about the way you could dance until your feet bled and your muscles screamed, about how you learned to smile through the pain to make destruction look like art. She thought about her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for Eva's ballet lessons, who'd driven her to rehearsals at 5 in the morning and sat through every recital, every performance beaming with pride, who'd told Eva on her deathbed that watching her daughter dance was the greatest gift she'd ever received. Eva made her choice. The same choice she'd made 6 months ago. The same choice she'd make again and again until one of them broke. She would betray Dominic. She would save her mother, and she would hate herself for every moment of it. But first she needed to know if Vivian was telling the truth about Dominic, if there really were crimes hidden in the foundation of his empire, or if Vivian was sending her on a hunt for evidence that didn't exist. The next morning Eva woke to find Dominic already gone. A note on his pillow written in his precise handwriting. Early meeting. Dinner tonight. Want to take my fiancé somewhere special. D. The word fiancé made her chest hurt. Eva showered and dressed in jeans and a sweater, trying to wash away the feeling of being split in two. She took the subway to Brooklyn, to her real apartment that she'd kept as insurance against the day Dominic's interest waned. The studio was exactly as she'd left it 3 weeks ago. 1-room kitchenette in the corner bathroom the size of a closet. Rent was $2,000 a month for 400 square feet of space that smelled like the Indian restaurant downstairs. But it was hers, bought with money she'd earned teaching children how to plie. Ava sat on the bed and pulled out her laptop. If she was going to find evidence against Dominic, she needed to know where to look. She started with public records, pulling up information on Ashford Development's major projects over the past decade. The tower that had replaced Whitmore Hotels stood in Midtown, 60 stories of glass and steel. Eva found the Planning Commission documents, the environmental impact statements, the permits and approvals. Everything looked legitimate on the surface. But then she found a footnote, a reference to an accelerated approval process that had bypassed the usual community review. She dug deeper, finding meeting minutes from the city council session where the project was approved. 4 council members had voted yes. 3 had been investigated later for corruption, though none had been convicted. Coincidence, maybe, or maybe not. Eva spent 6 hours going through records, making notes, following threads. By the time she surfaced, her eyes burned and her head ached. She'd found enough irregularities to raise questions, but nothing concrete. Nothing that would stand up in court or destroy a man. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Eva's pulse spiked, but it wasn't Vivian. Ms. Thorne. This is Rebecca Hayes. I'm an attorney. I represent several former employees of Ashford Development who are considering legal action. I was hoping we could meet. Eva's mouth went dry. How did you get this number? I have my sources. Look, I know you're engaged to Dominic Ashford. I know this is awkward. But I also know you used to be Evangeline Thorne, ballet dancer from Red Hook, who put herself through Juilliard on scholarships and student loans. I don't think you're the kind of woman who'd ignore wrongdoing just because you're sleeping with the man responsible." Rebecca's voice was sharp, certain. Eva found herself responding to it. What kind of wrongdoing? Construction fraud, safety violations that led to worker injuries, intimidation of employees who tried to report problems. I've got 3 clients willing to testify. I just need someone on the inside to corroborate their stories. Eva's heart hammered. This was exactly what Vivian wanted. Evidence, testimony, ammunition to destroy Dominic. But it was also something else. It was the truth trying to surface with or without Eva's help. "I need to think about this." Rebecca gave her an address in Chelsea. "I'll be in my office until 7 tonight. After that, I'm filing without insider testimony. It'll be harder to prove, but I'll do it anyway. These men deserve justice." Eva hung up and stared at her laptop screen. The tower that had replaced Whitmore Hotels gleamed in the architectural photos. She thought about all the buildings Dominic had constructed across Manhattan. How many had been built on bribes and buried bodies? How many workers had been hurt? How many families had been destroyed? She thought about the man who'd given her his mother's bracelet, who woke up at night haunted by ghosts, who'd built an empire from nothing because he'd grown up powerless and afraid. Maybe both versions were true. Maybe Dominic was both victim and villain, both the scared boy from Hell's Kitchen and the ruthless developer who crushed anyone in his way. Eva took the subway to Chelsea. Rebecca Hayes's office was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial windows. The attorney herself was younger than Eva expected, maybe 35, with dark hair pulled into a ponytail and glasses that made her look like she meant business. "Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would." Eva sat in the chair across from Rebecca's cluttered desk. "I haven't agreed to anything." "Fair enough. Let me show you what I've got." Rebecca pulled out 3 folders, laying them open. Photos of construction sites, medical records showing broken bones, respiratory damage, testimony from workers who'd been fired when they complained about unsafe conditions. "This is Miguel Santos. He fell 3 stories when scaffolding collapsed on the Ashford Tower project in 2019, spent 6 months in the hospital, lost the use of his right arm. Ashford Development settled out of court for $50,000 and made him sign an NDA. Rebecca opened another folder. "This is James Crawford. Developed mesothelioma from asbestos exposure during renovation of the old Whitmore building. He's got 2 kids and maybe a year to live. Ashford Development denied any responsibility." The 3rd folder showed a younger man, barely 20. Marcus Williams. Fell into a concrete mixer because the safety rails hadn't been installed yet. They were supposed to be up before any work started, but the foreman said they were behind schedule. Marcus died. His family got $100,000 and a gag order. Eva felt sick. These weren't just names in a lawsuit. They were people. Lives destroyed while Dominic got richer. How much of this did Ashford know about? Rebecca leaned back in her chair. That's the question, isn't it? Either he knew and didn't care, or he created a corporate culture where safety was optional and asking questions was a firing offense. Either way, he's responsible. Eva looked at the photos again. Miguel Santos in a hospital bed, arm in a cast. James Crawford with his children trying to smile despite the oxygen tube in his nose. Marcus Williams's mother at his funeral, her face collapsed with grief. What do you need from me? Access to internal documents. Emails, memos, anything showing that Ashford was aware of safety issues and chose to ignore them. With insider testimony, I can pierce the corporate veil. Without it, this case dies before it reaches trial. Eva thought about the penthouse, about all the nights Dominic had worked late in his home office, about the filing cabinets that were probably full of exactly the kind of evidence Rebecca needed. If I help you, I need something in return. Rebecca's expression didn't change. I'm listening. My mother has stage 4 cancer. She needs treatment that costs $500,000. If I bring you evidence, can you help me get the money? Rebecca was quiet for a moment. I can't pay you for evidence. That would compromise the case. But I can refer you to organizations that help families with medical costs. And if this case settles, there might be a whistleblower provision that rewards people who come forward. It wasn't enough. It wouldn't save her mother in time. But it was something, and something was better than watching helplessly while cancer ate away at the only family Eva had left. "I need time," Rebecca nodded. "You've got 2 weeks. After that, I file without you." Eva left the office and walked through Chelsea, not really seeing the galleries and boutiques. Her phone buzzed. Text from Dominic: reservation at Le Bernardin at 8. Can't wait to celebrate with you properly. Le Bernardin, one of the most expensive restaurants in New York. Dominic would order champagne and tell her about wedding plans, and Eva would sit across from him, knowing she'd just agreed to help destroy him. She thought about calling the whole thing off, walking away from Vivian, from Rebecca, from all of it. But then, what, her mother would die. Miguel Santos would never get justice. James Crawford would leave his children fatherless without anyone being held accountable. Eva had spent her whole life learning that grace required discipline, that beauty came from suffering perfected into art. Maybe this was the same. Maybe she could betray Dominic and save her mother and bring justice to people who'd been crushed under his ambition. Maybe she could make something meaningful out of all this pain. Or maybe she was just lying to herself to make betrayal easier to swallow. She went back to the penthouse to get ready for dinner. Dominic wasn't home yet. Eva went to his office, heart pounding. The door was usually locked, but today it stood open. His housekeeper must have been cleaning. The filing cabinets lined one wall. Eva tried the drawers. Locked. Of course they were locked. Dominic hadn't built an empire by being careless, but his desk wasn't locked. Eva opened the top drawer, finding pens and business cards and a folder labeled Current Projects. She flipped through it quickly. Permits for a new development in Queens, budget projections, contractor bids, nothing incriminating, nothing useful. She was about to close the drawer when she saw it. A flash drive tucked into a corner behind a stack of letterhead. Eva pulled it out, turning it over in her hands. It was unmarked generic. The smart thing would be to put it back, to walk away before Dominic came home and found her rifling through his things. Eva slipped the drive into her pocket. She closed the drawer and left the office, her pulse hammering. In her room, she plugged the drive into her laptop. Files populated the screen, hundreds of them organized by project name and date. Eva opened one at random. It was an email chain between Dominic and a city inspector discussing expedited processing of a building permit. The inspector mentioned a consultation fee of $20,000. Another file showed payments to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. No explanation of what the payments were for, but the amounts were large. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moving offshore. Eva kept clicking, her stomach sinking with each new revelation. Bribes to inspectors, payments to organized crime figures who controlled construction unions, falsified safety reports, emails from Dominic himself ordering his team to handle problems with city officials. This wasn't just corner cutting, it was systematic corruption. Years of it documented in meticulous detail. Eva pulled the drive from her laptop and sat there holding it like it might burn her. This was what Vivian wanted, what Rebecca needed. Evidence so damning that Dominic would never recover. But it was also private. These were files Dominic had kept hidden, protected. Finding them was one kind of betrayal. Using them would be another entirely. Eva's phone buzzed. Text from her mother's nurse. "Your mom had a good day. She was asking about you. Said she can't wait to hear about your engagement. She's so proud." The words hit like a hammer. Her mother didn't know that her daughter's engagement was built on lies. Didn't know that the happy ending she was hoping for was really the opening act of a tragedy. Eva looked at the flash drive in her hand, then at the ring on her finger. She was caught between two futures, both terrible. Betray Dominic and save her mother, or stay loyal and watch her mother die. There was no third option, no clever solution that saved everyone. Just two bad choices, and Eva had to pick which destruction she could live with. She made a copy of the files and emailed them to Rebecca Hayes from a burner account she'd created. Then she put the original drive back in Dominic's desk, exactly where she'd found it. By the time Dominic came home, Eva was dressed for dinner in a black dress that cost more than her first car. She'd done her makeup carefully, hiding the evidence of tears. When he kissed her, she kissed back, tasting the lie on her lips. You look incredible." Dominic's eyes were warm, happy. He had no idea that his fiancée had just handed evidence of his crimes to a lawyer, no idea that the woman he loved was working for the ex-wife who'd spent 15 years planning his destruction. Ready to go celebrate, Eva took his arm, letting him lead her to the elevator. In the mirrored walls, she saw their reflection. They looked like any other wealthy couple heading out for an expensive dinner. Beautiful and successful and perfectly matched. No one looking at them would see the rot underneath. Le Bernardin was everything Eva expected. White tablecloths and hushed voices and food that was more art than sustenance. Dominic ordered champagne and oysters, talking about wedding venues and honeymoon destinations. Eva smiled and nodded, playing her part. "I was thinking we could get married at the plaza. Classic New York. Or maybe something smaller, more intimate. Whatever you want." Eva looked at the man across from her. In the candlelight he looked younger, softer. This was the version of Dominic that most people never saw, the one who wasn't always performing, always selling. "Dominic, can I ask you something?" "Anything." Eva chose her words carefully. "The Whitmore project, the one that became Ashford Tower. What happened there?" His expression shifted, becoming guarded. "Why are you asking about that?" "Vivian mentioned her father. I just want to understand what happened." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, swirling champagne in his glass. Harrison Whitmore was a dinosaur. He ran his hotels like it was still 1950, refused to modernize, refused to adapt. I made him an offer, a good offer, to buy him out. He said no. So I did what I had to do. Which was what? Dominic's eyes were hard now. I built something better in the same location. I gave the city a tower instead of a relic. I created jobs, economic growth. Harrison couldn't compete, so he folded. That's business, Eva. It's not personal. But he killed himself. Dominic flinched. That wasn't my fault. He made his own choices. Eva wondered if he believed that. If you could convince yourself that you weren't responsible for the bodies you left behind as long as you hadn't pulled the trigger yourself. Do you regret it? Any of it? Dominic reached across the table, taking her hand, the one with his ring on it. I regret that people got hurt. I regret that Harrison couldn't accept change, but I don't regret building something that will stand for 100 years. That's my legacy, Eva, not the people who couldn't keep up. Eva pulled her hand back, the ring suddenly feeling like it was cutting off her circulation. She thought about Miguel Santos's broken arm, James Crawford's dying lungs, Marcus Williams's mother weeping at a funeral, not the people who couldn't keep up. Dominic noticed her withdrawal. Hey, I'm sorry if I sound cold. I've spent 20 years being told I'm a monster for doing what everyone else does, for playing the game the way it's meant to be played. Harrison knew the rules. He just didn't want to follow them. Eva wanted to ask if the rules included bribing inspectors and paying off mobsters, if the rules allowed for workers dying because safety was expensive. But she already knew the answer. For men like Dominic, there were no rules, only what you could get away with. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Dominic talked about expansion plans, about a new project in Boston that would be his biggest yet. Eva ate food she couldn't taste and drank wine that turned to vinegar in her mouth. When they got back to the penthouse, Dominic was in a good mood, buoyed by champagne and dreams of the future. He pulled Eva close, kissing her neck. I'm the luckiest man in New York. Eva closed her eyes and tried not to think about the flash drive in his desk, about the files she'd sent to Rebecca, about the investigation that was about to tear his life apart. She let him lead her to the bedroom because she didn't know what else to do. Because maybe if she could just pretend a little longer, she could convince herself this was real, that she wasn't a spy and a traitor, that she was just a woman in love with a complicated man. But when Dominic fell asleep, Eva lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her mother in the hospital, about Vivian somewhere in the city waiting for Eva to destroy the man sleeping beside her, about Rebecca Hayes and the 3 workers who deserved justice. She thought about ballet and how you could practice the same movement 1,000 times and still not get it right. How perfection was always just out of reach, always requiring more discipline, more sacrifice, more pain. Eva's phone lit up on the nightstand. Text from an unknown number. She already knew who it was before she opened it. "Good work, Ms. Thorne. Your mother's next treatment is approved. Keep bringing me what I need and she might just survive this. And you might survive what's coming." Eva deleted the message and set the phone down, her hands shaking. She'd crossed a line tonight. There was no going back now, no way to undo what she'd set in motion. In 3 days, Rebecca Hayes would file her lawsuit armed with evidence that Eva had stolen. The dominoes would start to fall, and Eva would have to watch the man she'd betrayed crumble under the weight of his own crimes. She'd chosen to save her mother. Now she had to live with the cost. Eva got out of bed and went to the window looking out over the city Dominic had conquered. Somewhere down there, Miguel Santos was learning to live with one arm. James Crawford was explaining to his children why Daddy was so sick. Marcus Williams' mother was sleeping alone in a house that would always feel too empty. And somewhere Vivian Ashford was smiling, watching her revenge finally take shape after 15 years of patient hatred. Eva pressed her forehead against the glass, the city lights blurring through her tears. She'd spent her whole life trying to be good, trying to do the right thing. But there was no right thing here. Only different kinds of wrong, and the question of which kind she could live with. She'd made her choice. Now she had to become the person capable of following through. Behind her, Dominic stirred in his sleep, murmuring her name. Eva closed her eyes and tried to remember why she'd ever thought love and survival could coexist in the same breath. The lawsuit hit like a freight train on a Tuesday morning. Eva was making coffee when Dominic's phone started ringing. Once, twice, a dozen times in rapid succession. His publicist, his lawyer, his business partners, all calling with the same news. Rebecca Hayes had filed a civil action against Ashford Development on behalf of 3 former employees. The complaint was 90 pages long and included allegations of bribery, safety violations, and corporate fraud. Worse, she had evidence. Emails, financial records, testimony that lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. Dominic stood in the kitchen reading the complaint on his tablet, his face draining of color. Eva watched him from across the marble island, the engagement ring on her finger feeling heavier with each passing second. "This is impossible. These files are sealed. Attorney-client privilege. How did she get them?" His eyes met Eva's, and for one terrible moment she thought he knew. But his expression wasn't accusation. It was confusion, betrayal, the look of a man watching his empire crack open. "Someone inside the company leaked this. Someone I trusted." Eva's coffee turned to acid in her stomach. She set the cup down carefully, afraid her shaking hands would give her away. "What does this mean?" Dominic scrolled through the document, his jaw tight. "It means I'm fucked. If even half of this is true, I'm looking at criminal charges, prison time, everything I've built gone." He slammed the tablet down on the counter. The crack echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. 20 years. 20 goddamn years of work, and some lawyer with a grudge is going to burn it all down. Eva wanted to tell him the truth, wanted to explain about her mother, about Vivian, about the impossible choices that had led here. But the words stayed locked in her throat, cowardice dressed up as strategy. Dominic's phone rang again, his lawyer. He answered, pacing to the window while he talked. Eva couldn't hear the full conversation, but she caught fragments. Deposition, discovery, criminal referral to the DA's office. When he hung up, Dominic looked older. The confidence that usually radiated off him had dimmed, leaving behind someone hollow and afraid. "I need to go to the office. Handle this before it gets worse." He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made Eva want to scream. Then he was gone, the elevator doors closing on his retreating back. Eva stood alone in the penthouse that no longer felt like home. Her phone buzzed. Text from Vivian. Phase 1 complete. Your mother's treatment starts today. Rebecca filed early with the evidence you provided. Well done. Don't celebrate yet. This is just the beginning. So that explained it. Rebecca had promised Eva 2 weeks, but the flash drive had been too good to wait. The attorney had filed immediately, armed with documentation so damning it couldn't be ignored. Eva deleted the message and walked to the bathroom, where she vomited until there was nothing left. Her phone rang, a number she didn't know but somehow expected. "Ms. Thorne, this is Theodore Thorne. We need to meet." Eva's breath caught. Theodore Thorne. The man who'd sponsored her ballet training, who'd paid for Juilliard when her mother couldn't. The man she'd thanked in letters and never met in person, who'd always kept his distance, communicating through lawyers and wire transfers. "Who are you?" There was a long pause. "I'm someone who's been watching out for you since you were 13 years old, and I think it's time we talked about what you've gotten yourself into." He gave her an address in the West Village, a coffee shop neutral territory. Eva's hands were shaking as she wrote it down. "How did you know about—" "I know about everything, Evangeline. Vivian Ashford is not as careful as she thinks. I've had people monitoring her activities for years. The question is whether you're ready to hear the truth." The line went dead. Eva stood there holding her phone, her mind racing. Theodore Thorne had been a ghost her entire adult life. Anonymous benefactor, fairy godfather. The reason she'd been able to pursue ballet instead of getting a job at 16. And now he wanted to meet, and he knew about Vivian. She took the subway to the West Village, too paranoid to use Dominic's driver. The coffee shop was small, tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing boutique. Inside, an older man sat at a corner table. Silver hair, expensive suit worn with casual ease. He looked up when Eva entered, and she saw something in his face that made her chest constrict. Her mother's eyes. The same warm brown, the same slight downturn at the corners. Eva's knees went weak. She sat down across from him, unable to speak. Theodore smiled, sad and knowing. "I can see you figured it out. You look so much like her. Like Sarah." "You're my father." The words came out flat, emotionless. Eva felt like she was floating somewhere above herself, watching this scene play out. "I am. I'm sorry it took me this long to tell you face to face." Eva's hands clenched into fists on the table. "My mother told me you were dead. She said you died before I was born." "Your mother told you what I asked her to tell you, what I thought would be easier than the truth." Theodore signaled the waitress, ordering 2 coffees with the ease of someone used to being obeyed. When she left, he leaned forward, his expression grave. "I was married when I met Sarah. Unhappily, but married. My wife couldn't have children, and I'd resigned myself to that. Then I met your mother at a fundraiser. She was waitressing, trying to make rent while she auditioned for dance companies. She was the most alive person I'd ever seen." Eva didn't want to hear this. Didn't want to humanize the man who'd abandoned them, who'd reduced himself to checks and anonymous gifts. "We had an affair, brief, passionate. When she got pregnant, I offered to leave my wife to marry her. But Sarah said no. She said she wouldn't be responsible for destroying someone else's marriage, even an unhappy one. She told me to stay away to let you believe I was dead, but I couldn't completely disappear, so I set up the trust fund. Made sure you had opportunities I couldn't give you openly." The waitress returned with coffee. Eva wrapped her hands around the cup, needing something to hold on to. "Why now? Why are you telling me this?" Theodore's expression darkened. "Because I know what you're doing, Evangeline. I know about Vivian Ashford and her vendetta. I know about the evidence you stole from Dominic. I know you're in over your head. I've had investigators watching Vivian since her father died. She came to me first, you know, before she found you. Wanted my help destroying Dominic. I refused." Eva's blood turned to ice. "How?" "I was Harrison Whitmore's business partner. I'm the one who sold him out when I saw which way the wind was blowing. I'm the one who saved myself while he drowned." Theodore's voice was bitter self-loathing. "Vivian came to me after her father died. She was 27 and full of rage, and she wanted help destroying Dominic Ashford. I said no. I told her revenge wouldn't bring her father back, but clearly she found another way. When my investigators told me she'd approached you, that she was using your mother's illness as leverage, I realized I had to intervene." Eva's mind raced, trying to process this revelation. "If you were Harrison's partner, then you knew what Dominic did. The bribes, the corruption. I knew all of it because I was part of it. Every developer in this city plays the same game, Evangeline. You grease the right palms, you cut the right corners. It's not right, but it's how things work." Harrison knew it. I knew it. Dominic knew it. Theodore took a sip of coffee, his hand steady despite the confession. "The difference is, Dominic was better at it than we were. hungrier, more willing to burn everything down to build something new. Harrison couldn't accept being beaten by someone younger and smarter. It destroyed him. Eva thought about the files she'd stolen, the evidence that would destroy Dominic. Those workers who got hurt, Marcus Williams who died. You're saying that's just business. I'm saying it's the cost of building empires. You think the men who built this city did it with clean hands. Every skyscraper in Manhattan is built on someone's bones. Theodore's eyes were hard now, challenging. You want to destroy Dominic Ashford, fine, but understand what that makes you. Understand who you're working for. Vivian isn't some righteous crusader. She's a woman who married a man she hated, spent 15 years sleeping beside him, all to orchestrate his destruction. That's not justice. That's sickness. Eva's throat was tight. My mother is dying. Vivian is paying for her treatment. Theodore reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, setting it on the table. That's a cashier's check for $750,000. Enough to cover your mother's treatment without Vivian's money. No strings, no conditions. Just a father trying to give his daughter a choice. Eva stared at the envelope like it might explode. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The check was real, drawn on a private bank, Theodore's signature at the bottom. $750,000. Your mother is at Mount Sinai, room 437. I've been visiting her for years. She thinks I'm just another hospital volunteer. I read to her, bring her flowers. I've been too much of a coward to tell her who I really am. Theodore stood, leaving cash on the table for the coffee. You have a choice now, Evangeline. You can continue working for Vivian, let her use you to destroy a man who's guilty, but no more guilty than any of us. Or you can take that money, save your mother, and walk away from all of this. It's not that simple. The lawsuit is already filed. Dominic's going to be investigated no matter what I do now. Then tell him the truth. Give him a chance to defend himself, knowing who betrayed him. Let him decide whether to forgive you or destroy you, but stop being Vivian's puppet. Theodore walked out, leaving Eva alone with coffee she couldn't drink, and a check that represented freedom she didn't deserve. She sat there for a long time, watching the West Village go by outside the window. Finally, she pulled out her phone and called the one person who might understand. Mount Sinai Hospital. How may I direct your call? Room 437, please. The line clicked and rang. Once, twice, then, a weak voice Eva knew better than her own. Hello. Mom, it's me. Sarah Thorne's breath caught. Eva, sweetheart, I wasn't expecting you to call. Is everything okay? No, nothing was okay. Everything was falling apart, and Eva was the one holding the match. I need to see you. I'm coming to the hospital. Now it's barely noon on a Tuesday. Don't you have class? Eva had stopped teaching ballet months ago when she'd moved into the penthouse. Her mother didn't know that, didn't know anything about the life Eva had been living. I canceled. I'll be there in an hour. She hung up before her mother could ask questions Eva wasn't ready to answer. The subway ride to Mount Sinai felt like it took forever and no time at all. Eva clutched Theodore's check in her purse, the paper already creased from her grip. The oncology ward smelled like disinfectant and despair. Eva had spent so many hours here over the past year that the nurses recognized her, waving sadly as she passed. Room 437 was at the end of the hall door, half open. Sarah Thorne sat propped up in bed, an IV running into her arm. She'd lost more weight since Eva's last visit 2 weeks ago. Her cheekbones stood out sharp against paper-thin skin, and her hair had thinned to wisps. But her eyes were still bright, still warm, still full of the love that had sustained Eva through every hardship. There's my beautiful girl. Eva crossed the room and fell into her mother's arms, careful not to jostle the tubes and wires. Sarah smelled like hospital soap, and the lavender lotion Eva brought her mixed with something medicinal and wrong. Mom! The word came out broken. Eva buried her face in her mother's shoulder and cried, all the guilt and fear and shame pouring out in great heaving sobs. Sarah held her daughter, stroking her hair, making the same soothing sounds she'd made when Eva was small and had fallen and scraped her knee. Shh, baby. It's okay. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. I did something terrible. I hurt people. I lied and stole, and I don't know how to fix it." Sarah pulled back, cupping Eva's face in hands that were all bone and loose skin. "Then you tell me. Start from the beginning and tell me everything." So Eva did. She told her mother about meeting Dominic, about Vivian's offer, about the contract she'd signed to save her mother's life. She told her about falling in love with the man she was supposed to destroy, about stealing evidence and watching his world crumble. She told her about Theodore, about the check, about having the money to save her mother, but not the courage to undo what she'd done. When she finished, Sarah was quiet for a long time. Finally she spoke, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Ava, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm dying. The doctors say I have maybe 3 months, maybe 6 if the experimental treatment works. But baby, I'm 62 years old and I've had a good life. I watched you dance at Lincoln Center. I saw you become someone extraordinary. That's enough." "Mom, no." "Let me finish." Sarah's grip tightened on Eva's hands. "I would rather die tomorrow than live knowing my daughter destroyed herself to buy me a few more months. You think I want that? You think I want to spend my final days watching you become someone I don't recognize?" Eva's tears were falling freely now, dripping onto the thin hospital blanket. "You have to make this right, Eva. Not for me. For you. Because if you don't, you'll spend the rest of your life being the woman who sold her soul and baby. That's a worse death than cancer." Sarah reached for the call button, pressing it until a nurse appeared. "Yes, Mrs. Thorne? I need you to document something. I'm refusing all further treatment. No more chemotherapy, no experimental trials. I want to go into hospice." The nurse's eyes widened. "Mrs. Thorne, are you sure the new protocol was showing promise?" "I'm sure. My daughter will help me with the paperwork." When the nurse left, Sarah turned back to Eva. "Now you don't have to choose between saving me and doing the right thing. The choice is made. You're going to take that check your father gave you, and yes, I always knew Theodore was alive, knew he was helping you, and you're going to use it to fix what you broke." "I don't know how." "Yes, you do. You tell Dominic Ashford the truth. All of it. You give him the evidence to fight back against Vivian. You testify about what she made you do, and then you let the chips fall where they may." Sarah's breathing was labored, the conversation taking its toll. "Eva, I'm going to tell you something I should have told you years ago. Your father offered to leave his wife for me. He wanted to marry me, raise you together. I said no because I was proud, because I didn't want to be the other woman, didn't want our love to be built on someone else's pain." She coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "I've spent 30 years wondering if I made the right choice, if I was noble or just stupid. But watching you now, seeing what secrets and lies have done to you, I know. Truth is the only thing worth building a life on, even when it's ugly, even when it costs everything." Eva stayed with her mother until visiting hours ended. They talked about ballet, about Sarah's childhood in Boston, about all the small, beautiful moments they'd shared over 28 years. When Eva finally left, she kissed her mother's forehead and whispered the words that had been stuck in her throat. "I love you. Thank you for showing me how to be brave." The subway ride back to the penthouse was a blur. Eva clutched Theodore's check and thought about what her mother had said. Truth was the only thing worth building a life on. When Eva got home, Dominic wasn't there. A text on her phone explained he was meeting with lawyers, wouldn't be back until late. Eva was grateful for the time alone, the space to figure out what came next. She went to his office and turned on his computer. His password was her birthday, sweet and trusting. Eva's chest ached as she logged in. But this time she wasn't stealing. This time she was looking for something else. She found what she needed in a folder labeled Personal. Documents showing Dominic's charitable donations over the years. Millions given to schools in Hell's Kitchen, to programs helping at-risk youth, to scholarships for kids who looked like he used to look. Evidence that the man who'd bribed inspectors and cut corners had also built parks and funded hospitals, and given back to the community that raised him. It didn't erase his crimes, didn't make Miguel Santos's broken arm or James Crawford's dying lungs or Marcus Williams's death any less real. But it complicated the picture. made Dominic into what he'd always been, not a villain or a hero, just a human being who'd done both beautiful and terrible things. Eva printed the documents and added them to a folder she was building. Then she started writing. A detailed account of everything Vivian had done. The contract, the threats, the manipulation. The 15-year plan to destroy Dominic, not out of justice, but out of pure hatred. When Dominic came home at midnight, Eva was waiting for him in the living room. She'd changed out of her expensive clothes into jeans and a sweater, the costume of who she used to be. The engagement ring sat on the coffee table between them. "Eva, what's going on? Sit down, please. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you react." Dominic's face went pale. "You're leaving me. I'm telling you the truth. Finally." And she did. Every word, every detail, every terrible choice. She told him about Vivian's contract, about her mother's cancer, about the flash drive she'd stolen and the evidence she'd given Rebecca Hayes. She told him about Theodore, about the check, about choosing to save her mother by destroying him. When she finished, Dominic sat motionless. His face had gone through shock, rage, pain, and landed on something Eva couldn't read. "You've been lying to me this whole time. Everything between us was a lie." "No. The lie was the plan. Falling in love with you was the only real thing I've done in months." Eva slid the folder across the coffee table. "That's everything I have on Vivian, proof of what she made me do, how she manipulated both of us. And this," she handed him Theodore's check, "is how I'm paying back what I took from you. $750,000. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's all I have." Dominic picked up the check, staring at it. "Your mother's treatment money. She doesn't want it. She's going into hospice. She said she'd rather die than watch me become someone she doesn't recognize." The words broke something in Dominic's face. He stood abruptly, walking to the window. Eva watched his reflection in the glass, saw him fighting for control. "I should hate you. I should throw you out and never speak to you again." "I know. But I don't. And that makes me either the biggest fool in New York or—" He turned around and Eva saw tears on his face. "Or someone who understands what it's like to make terrible choices because you're scared and desperate and you don't see another way out." Dominic crossed the room and knelt in front of Eva, taking her hands. "I'm guilty, Eva. Everything in that lawsuit is true. I bribed inspectors. I paid off union bosses. I cut corners that got people hurt. I told myself it was necessary, that everyone does it, that you can't build anything great without breaking some rules." His voice cracked. "But Marcus Williams is dead because of me. His mother buried her son because I needed my building finished on schedule. There's no redemption for that, no amount of charity that balances those scales." Eva pulled him close and they held each other while the city glittered below. Two broken people who'd hurt each other and themselves, trying to find something worth saving in the wreckage. "What do we do now?" Dominic pulled back, wiping his eyes. "We do what your mother said. We tell the truth. All of it. I'm going to the DA tomorrow, and I'm going to confess. Give them everything they need to prosecute me properly. No lawyers hiding evidence, no plea bargains, just the truth. They'll send you to prison. Probably. But maybe that's what I deserve. And maybe it's the only way to stop being the man who could look at Marcus Williams's death and call it the cost of doing business." Eva thought about ballet, about all the years she'd spent chasing perfection, about learning that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was admit you'd failed and start over. "I'll testify, against Vivian about what she did, but also about what I did, about my choices. I won't let you take the fall alone." Dominic shook his head. "You were manipulated, coerced. Any lawyer worth their salt will get you immunity in exchange for testimony. I don't want immunity. I want to face what I've done." They sat together as the night deepened, making plans. Dominic would turn himself in. Eva would testify. They would use Vivian's conspiracy against her, expose the 15-year plan that had used them both as pawns. And when it was over, when they'd faced the consequences and paid what debts could be paid, they would see if anything remained worth building on. "I can't promise I'll wait for you," Eva said quietly. If they send you to prison for 10 years, 20 years, I'm not asking you to wait. I'm asking you to remember that you were strong enough to tell me the truth even when it cost everything. That's worth more than any promise. Eva picked up the engagement ring from the table. The 3-carat diamond caught the light, throwing rainbows across the wall. She'd worn it for less than a week. I can't keep this. I don't want it back. Sell it. Use the money for your mother's hospice care. Make her final months as comfortable as possible. Eva's tears started again. I don't deserve you. We don't deserve each other. But maybe that's the point. Maybe love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to see someone fully and love them anyway. The next morning they went to the DA's office together. Dominic had called ahead, arranged a meeting. His lawyers were furious, begging him to reconsider, but for the first time in 20 years, Dominic Ashford wasn't listening to lawyers. The confession took 6 hours. Dominic laid out 2 decades of corruption with meticulous detail. Eva sat beside him, holding his hand while he destroyed himself. When it was over, the assistant district attorney looked at them both with something like respect. Mr. Ashford, you'll be arraigned tomorrow. Given the severity of the charges and your cooperation, we're recommending bail be set at $5 million. Dominic nodded. He'd expected this. Miss Thorne, we'll need your testimony about Vivian Ashford's role in this conspiracy. In exchange for full cooperation, we're prepared to offer you immunity. Eva looked at Dominic, who squeezed her hand. Then she turned to the ADA. I don't want immunity. I stole evidence, committed corporate espionage. I want to plead guilty to whatever charges are appropriate and accept the consequences. The ADA blinked. Ms. Thorne, you were coerced? I had choices. I made them. Bad ones. I want to face what I've done. The lawyer made notes, shaking her head. I've never seen anything like this. 2 people racing to confess. Usually everyone's fighting to avoid responsibility. Eva thought about her mother, about Sarah Thorne choosing honesty over comfort, truth over survival. Maybe that's why everything's broken. Because people keep running from what they've done instead of standing still and facing it. 3 months later, Eva sat in a courtroom and watched Dominic Ashford sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The judge called him a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition and corporate greed, but she also noted his cooperation, his remorse, his genuine attempt to make amends. Vivian Ashford sat in the gallery, her face frozen in fury. She'd been arrested 2 weeks after Dominic's confession, charged with conspiracy and witness tampering. Her trial was scheduled for next year. Eva would testify, would help send the woman who'd manipulated her to prison. But that was future. Right now, Eva watched the man she loved be led away in handcuffs and felt something like peace. She'd been sentenced too. 1 year in minimum security for corporate espionage, to be served concurrently with 2 years probation. The judge had been lenient, moved by Eva's genuine remorse and her mother's illness. Sarah had died 2 weeks ago, peacefully in a hospice facility that Theodore had paid for. Eva had been there holding her mother's hand when she slipped away. Sarah's last words had been simple. You did good, baby. I'm proud of you. Eva carried those words like a talisman now, a reminder that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing every day to be someone worth your mother's pride. After the sentencing, Theodore found her in the courthouse hallway. How are you holding up? Eva managed a smile. Better than I deserve. Worse than I'd like. Your mother would be proud. I was with her, you know. At the end. I finally told her who I was. Eva's breath caught. What did she say? She laughed. Said she'd known all along, had been waiting 30 years for me to find the courage to admit it. Theodore's eyes were wet. Then she told me to take care of you, made me promise. He pulled Eva into a hug, and she let herself cry on her father's shoulder for the first time in her life. I'm going to wait for him, Eva said when she pulled back. Dominic, when we both get out, I'm going to wait and see if there's anything left worth saving. That's a long time to wait. 8 years. He'll be out in 5 with good behavior, and I'll be out in 10 months. That gives me time to figure out who I want to be when I'm not lying to everyone, including myself. Theodore nodded. For what it's worth, I think you're already becoming that person. It's not easy choosing truth over convenience. Most people never do. Eva thought about ballet, about the years she'd spent chasing perfection through discipline and pain, about learning that sometimes the most beautiful movement was the one where you fell and got back up again. I'm going back to teaching when I get out. There's a community center in Brooklyn that works with at-risk kids. They need a dance instructor. Your mother would love that. I know, that's why I'm doing it. Eva walked out of the courthouse into cold December air. The city stretched before her, full of buildings Dominic had constructed and lives he'd changed both beautifully and terribly. She thought about Vivian, rotting in a jail cell consumed by hatred that had eaten 15 years of her life, about Rebecca Hayes and her 3 clients finally getting some measure of justice, about Miguel Santos and James Crawford and Marcus Williams's mother living with consequences they'd never chosen. She thought about Dominic, who would spend the next 5 years learning to be someone who valued human life over schedules and profits, about whether people could really change or if they just became better at hiding who they'd always been. And she thought about herself, about the woman who'd danced through pain until her feet bled, who'd loved her mother more than she'd loved herself, who'd chosen betrayal and then chosen truth. The subway entrance beckoned. Eva descended into the tunnels, joining the flow of humanity that kept the city moving. In 10 months she'd emerge from prison. In 5 years maybe she'd see if Dominic emerged too. In between she'd learn to live with what she'd done to carry her guilt, like a dancer carries injury, acknowledging it, working through it, becoming stronger in the broken places. Above her, the city continued its relentless rhythm. Buildings rose and fell. Empires were built and destroyed. People made terrible choices, and beautiful ones often in the same breath. And somewhere in all that chaos, Eva Thorne found something she'd been chasing her whole life without knowing it. Not perfection, not redemption, not even forgiveness. Just the quiet dignity of facing what you've done, accepting who you are, and choosing to become someone better. One honest step at a time.